I'm not proud of what I did. Let's just get that out of the way. In my defense, the lighting was dim, the meatball was aggressively seasoned, and the molar had already been hanging on by a thread for weeks. But yeah, on a chilly Thursday night, in the middle of my cousin's birthday dinner, I crunched down on something that didn't belong. It was the unmistakable snap of a tooth giving up on life. A jolt of pain. A quick, involuntary swallow. And then, nothing. Just silence and regret, coated in marinara. I froze mid-bite, eyes watering slightly, unsure if I should panic or pretend it was part of the experience. "You okay?" my cousin's girlfriend asked, handing me a napkin. I nodded and said the first thing that came to mind. Just got emotional. The spices reminded me of my grandma. Everyone around the table nodded in solemn understanding. Nobody questioned the tear. I mean, it was spicy. I excused myself and headed to the bathroom to confirm the damage. Sure enough, a clean, molar-sized gap stared back at me in the mirror. I poked it with my tongue and whispered, "You idiot," to my reflection. Then I did something even dumber. When I came back to the table, someone new was sitting in the empty seat next to mine. Tall, dark-haired, laughing politely at one of my cousin's dad jokes. She turned toward me and smiled, and I swear time did a weird hiccup. Her name was Grace. She'd arrived late, a friend of my cousin's coworker or something like that. She offered her hand, and I offered my most toothless smile. We got to talking, and by the time dessert rolled around, I'd forgotten about my dental crisis entirely. That is, until she asked, "So what do you do?" I meant to say marketing. What I actually said, thanks to the new gap and an unfortunately sticky piece of tiramisu, was more like ing. She blinked. I panicked. I had a root canal earlier, I lied. Still a little numb. She nodded, impressed. "Wow, and you still came out to dinner? That's dedication." And I, fueled by embarrassment and the kind of pride that only kicks in when you've just eaten your own tooth, said, "Yeah, well, I didn't want to miss out. Plus, soft foods are easier right now." "Smart," she said, and I smiled. Or at least tried to. By the end of the night, I had her number. Grace and I started texting the next day. At first, it was the usual small talk. "Nice meeting you. Crazy how loud that restaurant was. Do you always have such strong opinions about garlic bread?" But then the conversations grew longer, funnier, and occasionally a little flirty. She had this way of being curious without being nosy, and I liked that more than I expected. Somewhere around day 4, she sent a photo of her dog wearing socks. "Toby hates the cold," the caption read. I laughed out loud in a quiet cafe and scared the barista. I replied with a selfie of me holding a mug and looking mysterious, captioned, "Recovering well from the root canal." She responded with a row of clapping emojis and a heart. That's when I realized something important. I couldn't keep up the tooth life forever. I told her I'd had a root canal, which explained the speech weirdness and my early exit from dessert. But I hadn't, and now I was cornered into pretending I had for reasons even I didn't fully understand. I told myself I'd clear it up the next time we hung out. That came sooner than expected. A week later, Grace invited me over for dinner. "I make a killer risotto," she wrote. "Soft food friendly." A wink emoji followed, and I swear my stomach did a little nervous backflip. That night, I flossed for no reason and Googled how to sound like you've had dental work. I even practiced talking with one side of my mouth slightly frozen, just in case. The doorbell rang. I smoothed my shirt, checked my reflection, and walked into the most delightfully awkward dinner of my life. Grace's apartment was warm, smelled like garlic and thyme, and had little sticky notes labeling everything from the salt jar, not sugar. Trust me, to the cat bed, Toby's throne. Dinner was amazing. We talked about everything: music, family, the weirdness of online reviews. At one point, she paused and said, "You know, you're nothing like I expected." I blinked. "That good or bad?" She grinned. "Definitely good. Most people would have used a dental excuse to cancel. But you showed up anyway." I nodded solemnly. "I take dinner very seriously." She laughed. I laughed. And then, after dessert, we kissed. It should have been perfect. Except. She leaned back, looked at me, and frowned slightly. "Wait, did you say it was a back molar you had worked on?" I froze. Yeah. Why?" "Because," she said, squinting, "I'm seeing a pretty obvious gap on the left. But you chewed with the right all night. That's weird, isn't it?" My stomach dropped. I did what any brave, mature adult would do in that moment of escalating panic. I coughed. Loudly. Then I grabbed my water and said, "It's funny you noticed that. Actually, turns out the numbness shifted. It happens sometimes. Nerve migration. Real thing." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Nerve migration?" "Yep." I nodded, overly confident, like I'd just invented the term and gotten it FDA approved. "Happens to, like, 4% of dental patients. I think. Could be 14%. Or 40. She stared at me. her face unreadable. So, you just made that up, didn't you? I froze mid-sip. And then, thank God she laughed. Not a polite laugh either. A full-on, head back, hand-to-chest kind of laugh that shook the table and made Toby bark once from the hallway. Oh my gosh, she said between giggles, you didn't have a root canal, did you? I shook my head slowly, cheeks burning. No. I bit into a meatball. It had a weird crunch. Next thing I know, I'm in the bathroom missing a molar and trying to look cool about it. She blinked. You swallowed your tooth? I panicked. You swallowed it. Like, fully? Mid-chew. Didn't even know until it was too late. Grace was silent for a long moment, then said, you told me you had a root canal. I didn't want you to think I was gross or weird. I've never swallowed a tooth before. And I was sitting next to this beautiful woman with a very judgmental-looking dog. She tilted her head, softening slightly. Okay. First of all, Toby judges everyone. And second, she paused. That's maybe the weirdest way someone's tried to impress me. I winced. So, we're good. She gave a small smile. I'm not saying you're off the hook, but it is a pretty unique story. Definitely top 5 dinner confessions. Top 5? I raised a brow. What beat me? She leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Once, a guy told me he was a beekeeper to sound cool. Found out during dessert he was deathly allergic to bees. Oof. I whistled. Okay, that's worse. We moved on. Laughed. Had wine. The lie became a joke, and somehow, the night only got better from there. But here's where it all really twisted. 3 weeks later, we were at a park picnic, sitting under a tree, talking about childhood injuries, because, of course, that's where the tooth story reemerged, when she turned and casually asked, wait, you still haven't gone to the dentist, have you? I hesitated. Nope. You should, she said, poking my arm. What if that tooth migrates again? I laughed. Fine. I'll make an appointment. But I didn't. Because the very next morning, I got a text from Grace's number. It said only this. Appointment confirmed. Thursday, 11 a.m. Dr. Ramirez. Don't be late. She booked it for me. I showed up to Dr. Ramirez's office with the energy of someone being sent to the principal for chewing gum in chapel. The receptionist greeted me like I was a regular, which felt oddly comforting until I remembered I'd been roped into this under false molar-related pretenses. You're here for the evaluation? She asked. Evaluation, judgment, minor shaming. Yeah, probably all of that. She laughed and handed me a clipboard. I filled it out, circling reason for visit, with a dramatic flourish. Lost tooth. Unintentional. Possibly meatball related. 10 minutes later, I was in the chair, bib around my neck, staring up at a ceiling tile shaped vaguely like a duck, when Dr. Ramirez walked in. Late 30s, confident energy, and eyes that said she'd seen way too many adult men panic in her chair. So, she said, glancing at her clipboard, we're here because of a swallowed molar and a complicated romance? I blinked. Did Grace tell you everything? She smirked. She's a friend. And yes, she may have texted me the phrase, mild liar, strong jawline, with 3 rolling eye emojis. I buried my face in my hands. This is mortifying. Relax, she said, snapping on gloves. You'd be shocked how many teeth get swallowed. I've heard worse. One guy lost his retainer while scuba diving. The exam was quick. She confirmed what I already knew. Molar gone, space oddly clean, gum healed surprisingly well. You could get an implant, she said, or just leave it. Totally up to you. Your jaw alignment looks fine. Do most people get implants? Depends, she said. How often do you plan on chewing emotionally symbolic meatballs in front of your partner? Low to moderate risk, I admitted. She chuckled. Well, then maybe hold off. You're lucky it wasn't worse. And hey, Grace clearly doesn't mind. When I got home, there was a paper bag on my porch with a note taped to it. In Grace's handwriting. Toothless doesn't mean tasteless. Enjoy. G. Inside, a homemade pasta dish. Soft. Creamy. Zero crunch. And tucked in the corner of the bag, just to be a menace, a tiny plastic tooth on a keychain. I called her. You were deeply chaotic. You're welcome, she said sweetly. Did Dr. Ramirez scold you? Not too bad. I think she likes you more than me. Well, she did say your x-rays looked symmetrical. That's high praise. And just like that, we slipped into a rhythm. The tooth debacle faded into legend. Our text threads grew into phone calls, which turned into full weekends together. 6 months in, I'd met her parents, her mom brought up the meatball story within the first 10 minutes, and she'd met mine. My dad printed out the dentist bill and framed it as a joke. Everything was easy, natural, until the proposal. Because yes, there was a proposal. And it had everything. A candle at dinner, a nervous pocket-patting routine, a surprise speech. And then, right as I pulled out the ring, Grace burst out laughing. Not because she was surprised, not because she was nervous, but because I tried to hide the ring in her risotto, and she'd almost swallowed it. Grace spent the first 10 seconds of my proposal coughing and laughing so hard she had to grip the table. "You tried to kill me with jewelry?" she gasped between wheezes. I was already on one knee, holding a now risotto slick ring between trembling fingers, muttering apologies like a man caught between romance and a lawsuit. "It was supposed to be poetic," I said helplessly. "Like, full circle. You swallowed something important that first night and it brought us together." I thought maybe she cut me off with a wave, still laughing. "You thought I should nearly swallow something again?" I stood up, abandoned the kneeling, and handed her the napkin-wrapped ring with the air of a child giving back a broken toy. I panicked halfway through the plan. "Okay?" I added. "The original idea was a picnic. There were going to be string lights. But then your dog peed on the extension cord and honestly, this was plan D." Grace stared at me, teary-eyed and tomato-smeared, then said the words that I will never forget. "You're ridiculous. But yes." I blinked. "Yes. Yes, you spicy meatball maniac. I'll marry you." Relief flooded every inch of me. The restaurant clapped. A nearby waiter whispered, "That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen," which honestly felt like the highest compliment. We kissed over the table, sauce and all. That night, we lay on her couch, Toby curled up between us, watching dumb TV with the ring sitting safely on her finger, no longer near her esophagus. "You ever think," she asked quietly, "what would have happened if you hadn't swallowed that tooth?" I thought for a second. I would have probably gone home early, avoided talking, hidden dental shame. She smiled. "And I'd still think you were just some quiet guy with watery eyes and an emotional connection to meatballs." I laughed. "But instead, you got a molar-less legend. And a really good story," she said. But the story wasn't done yet. Because exactly 1 week before our wedding, I got a phone call from an unknown number. A deep voice on the other end said just 5 words before hanging up. "I found your missing tooth." I stared at my phone like it had just grown legs. "I found your missing tooth? Who says that? Was it a prank? A threat? Some kind of delayed dental karma?" Grace was out getting her dress fitted, so I was alone with my spiraling thoughts and a half-eaten bag of pretzels I suddenly had no appetite for. I called the number back, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Hey, did you say you found my tooth? Who is this?" Nothing. For 3 hours. Then, at exactly 4:14 p.m., another message popped up. "Meet me behind Johnny's. Tonight, 8 p.m. Bring floss." I stared at the screen. Was I being lured into an underground dental cult? A cavity cartel? A molar mafia? Still, I was curious. Johnny's was the restaurant where I'd lost the tooth in the first place. The scene of the original crime. I told myself it had to be someone I knew, messing with me. Probably my cousin Andy. He's the type to send ransom notes for leftover cake. So at 7:55 p.m., I drove over, parked across the street, and tried to look casual as I strolled behind the building. It smelled like oregano and wet cardboard. Romantic. A figure stepped out from the shadows. Mid-40s. Leather jacket. A face that looked vaguely familiar. "You," he said, pointing at me like a game show host revealing a prize. "You're the guy. The meatball guy." I blinked. "I guess." He reached into his coat pocket slowly. I instinctively stepped back. "Relax," he said, pulling out a tiny plastic vial. Inside, a tooth. My tooth. "I think. You dropped this," he said with an odd sort of reverence. "Well, swallowed it. But it came back." I stared at the vial. "Wait, how did you get it?" He shrugged. "Long story. I work at a waste processing plant. I found this 2 weeks after your cousin's dinner party. It stood out. Perfect molar. No decay. Practically sparkling. I kept it. For years." "Why?" I asked, both horrified and morbidly curious. "Because," he said seriously, "I believed it was a sign. And I figured one day its owner would come looking. That never even crossed my mind." He nodded. "Until I saw your engagement photo in the local paper. Grace DeMarco and the mystery fiancé who once inspired the garlic bread uprising. The what now?" He pulled out a laminated clipping. There I was, face half covered by a meatball, holding hands with Grace, smiling like a man who still hadn't replaced his tooth. The caption below, "From mishap to marriage, local couple's meaty beginning." I gawked. This ran in the paper? Front page of the lifestyle section. He handed me the vial. Return of the prodigal molar. I took it, unsure whether to laugh or file a restraining order. "Thanks," I said slowly. "I guess. Use it wisely," he said before vanishing into the night like some weird dental Batman. I stood there a full minute, holding my long-lost tooth in a plastic container. And for some reason, all I could think was, how am I going to explain this to Grace? So, naturally, I did the dumbest thing possible. I didn't tell Grace. Not right away, at least. What was I supposed to say? Hey babe, remember that molar I swallowed before we met? A stranger in a leather jacket found it in a waste processing plant and returned it to me in an alley behind a restaurant. Yeah, that screams stable husband material. So instead, I tucked the vial into my sock drawer and tried to forget about it. I told myself it wasn't important. Just a weird footnote in a story that already had enough quirks. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Because 3 days before our wedding, Grace was reorganizing our sock drawer, something I didn't know people did until I met her, and she pulled out the vial with a confused look. "Why is there a tooth in here?" she asked. I blinked, froze. My brain queued up a dozen possible responses and rejected all of them. "Oh," I said finally. "That's, my old one." She squinted at it. "The one you swallowed?" "Yep." "So you found it?" "Sort of." She tilted her head. "Sort of." I exhaled, sat down, and told her everything. From the weird text to the man behind Johnny's to the lifestyle section article I didn't know existed until that night. She stared at me in disbelief. Then, slowly, she smiled. "You're serious?" "Completely." She picked up the vial again, peered at it like it was some sacred relic. "You know what this means? That we should probably move?" "No," she said, laughing. "It means this whole ridiculous journey, losing a tooth, lying about it, fake root canals, and risotto rings, it was meant to be." I raised an eyebrow. "You think the universe threw a molar at your love life?" "Yes," she said with a grin. And apparently it boomeranged back with a leather-jacketed prophecy. We both laughed so hard we ended up lying on the floor, crying, the tooth between us like a tiny, ridiculous monument to everything we'd stumbled through. That night, she texted our wedding planner. "New request. Can you add a small velvet box to the ceremony? We're walking down the aisle with a very special guest." I didn't ask questions. I was just relieved she wasn't running away screaming. But I should have known Grace had something up her sleeve. Because on our wedding day, right after the vows, when the officiant said, "You may exchange rings," Grace grinned at me, reached into her bouquet, and pulled out a tiny box. Inside? The tooth. On a gold chain. I stood there, mid-aisle, tucked slightly wrinkled from a poorly executed crouch during the vows, staring at a gold chain with my long-lost molar dangling like a lopsided charm. Grace beamed. "For better or for worse," she said, holding it up. "You swallowed it, now you wear it." The crowd laughed. I think someone clapped. The officiant cleared his throat, clearly wondering if this was part of the plan, or if he was trapped in some rom-com directed by a dentist. I took the chain, held it up, turned it over in my hand. It was ridiculous, sentimental, slightly unsettling, and somehow perfect. "I love you," I whispered, because honestly, what else do you say to the woman who turns your digestive mishap into a romantic artifact? After the ceremony, people swarmed us for photos. Grace's aunt wanted a selfie with the molar couple. My mom asked if I'd had it sanitized. Her brother joked that it looked like something you'd find in a pirate's chest. And then, during the reception, Grace stood up and tapped her glass for silence. "I have a toast," she said, clutching a champagne flute in one hand and the mic in the other. When I first met him, he had just swallowed a tooth. He was trying to act normal while actively panicking over the fact that part of his mouth was missing. And somehow, in the middle of that chaos, he told a lie about a root canal so confidently, I believed him. Not because it was believable, but because it was him. Sincere. Nervous. Honest in the weirdest possible way. People laughed. I covered my face with one hand. And I knew, she continued, if someone could mess up that badly and still make me want to share my garlic bread, he was worth keeping around. I looked up. Our eyes met. So here's to mistakes that turn into memories. To meatballs and molars. And to this guy, who I now legally own, enamel and all. The whole room erupted into cheers. I stood, walked over, and kissed her in front of everyone. Somewhere, a groomsman yelled, "Show the tooth," and I held up the necklace like it was Simba and the Lion King. The night rolled on dancing, cake, emotional uncles giving weirdly long speeches. At one point, Grace pulled me aside. "Did you ever think," she whispered, "this would be your legacy? Swallowing a tooth and turning it into a marital talisman?" "Not exactly." "Well," she said, pressing her forehead to mine, "it is. And I'm not mad about it." Later that night, as we slipped out of the reception and into our hotel suite, exhausted and full of cake, I found a note on the pillow. Not from Grace. Just 5 words, typed in clean black font. "Don't lose it again. G." I laughed so hard when I read that note. Grace had to come out of the bathroom mid-makeup removal to check I hadn't tripped over the minibar. I held it up. "You left this." She squinted at it, then smirked. "Nope, that wasn't me." My laughter froze. "Wait, what?" She shook her head, holding up her hands. "Seriously, that's not my note. Different paper, different font. I use purple gel pens. You know this." I sat slowly on the edge of the bed, rereading the note. So, someone else is invested in my tooth security? She plucked it from my hand, flipped it over. Nothing on the back. Great, I muttered. Now we have a molar stalker. Grace climbed into bed, propped herself up on her elbow, and grinned. We're a secret admirer with very specific interests. I groaned. Please don't let that become a thing. But it did. Because the next morning, as we checked out, the front desk clerk handed me a small box. This was left for you, she said, as casually as if she were offering mints. I opened it. Inside, a tiny tube of floss and a laminated card. On the card, typed neatly, "Take care of what remains." I turned to Grace, who was already holding back laughter. Okay, seriously, are you orchestrating some kind of elaborate dental-themed scavenger hunt? I swear I'm not, she said, eyes wide and suspiciously twinkly. But I wish I was. Back at home, the weirdness continued. A week into married life, a package arrived with no return address. Inside, a children's book titled The Tooth Who Got Away, with a sticky note on the cover that read, "Sound familiar?" The next day, a flyer appeared in our mailbox for a new business, Tooth Tales, personalized molar memorabilia. We're being haunted, I told Grace, half joking. By an incisor enthusiast. More like someone with a deeply specific Google alert, she said, flipping the flyer over. Look, there's a discount code. ToothLove23. Absolutely not, I said, snatching it away. But honestly, I was kind of impressed. Whoever was behind this had commitment, creativity, possibly a spreadsheet. Still, I figured it would die down. Like all weird little trends, it would fade, until Grace texted me a photo one afternoon from the local coffee shop. A sticker on the bathroom mirror. My tooth. The one from the necklace. Illustrated and smiling, with a word bubble that said, "You complete me." I called her instantly. This is getting out of hand. Babe, she said calmly, this was out of hand when a stranger returned your molar in a Ziploc bag. Fair. I had no rebuttal. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought crept in, a slightly anxious, slightly intrigued little whisper. What if this isn't random? What if this has never been random at all? That whisper wouldn't go away. Not while I brushed my teeth, with extra vigilance now, obviously. Not while we had dinner. Not even when Grace casually suggested turning the whole saga into a children's book called The Legend of the Runaway Molar. She even doodled a cartoon tooth with arms and a tiny backpack. But beneath the jokes, I felt it. A weird weight. Like someone was watching this unfold with far more interest than a missing tooth deserved. So I did what any overly curious man with Wi-Fi and poor impulse control would do. I went digging. First, I searched for the name on the kid's book cover, just in case. It was listed as HP Enamel. Not a real author. No website, no online presence, no Instagram account featuring latte art and dog photos. I searched the return address from the dental memorabilia flyer. It led to a P.O. box in a strip mall next to a vape shop and a psychic named Linda. When I called, a man answered with a thick Brooklyn accent and said, "We make novelty mugs. You want a mug?" No molars, apparently. The sticker at the coffee shop? The barista had no clue. Said it showed up one day. Thought it was marketing, she shrugged, handing me a cappuccino with a foam leaf that looked vaguely judgmental. Grace, for her part, found the whole thing wildly entertaining. Maybe it's your tooth's destiny, she mused one night. Like it's trying to live a bigger life than the rest of us. Great, I muttered. My dental trauma has gone rogue and picked up an agent. Do you think it'll go on tour? She joked. Do molars get paid in calcium? I laughed, but that itch in my brain didn't fade. And then, because life loves a callback, I got another text. No name, no number, just a photo. A wall covered in string, photos, and a pinned-up article from our wedding. In the center, my molar on the necklace, circled in red ink. Below it, one line of text. Everything changed when the tooth disappeared. I showed it to Grace. She stared at the screen, unblinking. Okay, she said slowly. That's a bit less whimsical. I nodded. Feels like we crossed from cute to cult. Do you think it's someone we know? I didn't answer right away. Then I said the thing that had been lurking in the back of my mind since the moment that man handed me the Ziploc bag behind Johnny's. I think this goes back further than we realize. Grace tilted her head. You think your tooth had a past life? No, I said, pausing. I think I did. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I opened the drawer and pulled out something I hadn't touched in years, an old box of photos from my childhood. I sifted through them until I found the one I didn't even know I remembered. Me, maybe 6 years old, smiling a toothy grin. But one thing was unmistakable, my front tooth. A perfect match for the one on the necklace now. Only, that shouldn't be possible. I lost that one when I was 7. I stared at the photo for what felt like an hour, holding it next to the necklace like some kind of low-stakes CSI agent, and the match was eerie. Same shape, same tiny chip on the left corner. That's not your molar, Grace said, frowning. That's a front tooth. I nodded, slowly piecing it together. I lost this one when I fell off my bike in second grade. It landed in the grass. We never found it. She looked from the photo to me to the necklace. Wait, you think this is that tooth? From when you were a kid? I nodded again. That man said he found it at the processing plant. But what if he didn't? What if he's been holding on to it for years? Grace blinked. But how would he even have it? I opened the box again and dug further, past birthday cards and faded Polaroids, until I found a school yearbook page. There he was, the man from the alley. His real name, Spencer Rule. He was my elementary school janitor. Always quiet, always watching. Gave out red pencils for good behavior and once fixed my broken backpack zipper without saying a word. SR, I whispered. The initials scratched into the key. The ones on the envelope years ago when I got my braces removed and received a weird and signed letter in the mail that simply said, "You won't need those much longer." Back then, I thought it was a mistake. Now, I wasn't so sure. Grace leaned in, reading the name under his picture. Spencer Rule, she said. Isn't that the guy who went missing in 2004? I finished. They said he vanished from his trailer park one night. Left no note. Took nothing. Just disappeared. We sat in silence, processing it. The tooth. The man. The symbols. Grace finally said, "This feels like a conspiracy nobody asked for." I agreed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. This wasn't just about a swallowed molar or a mistaken identity. It was about me, my childhood, the missing tooth, the man who vanished. Why would he keep your baby tooth? She asked. And why now? Why return it after all this time? I didn't know. Not yet. But that night, I dreamed of Spencer. He was sitting on the school steps, holding a shoebox full of teeth. Mine were on top. One by one, he whispered their names. And then, just before I woke up, he looked at me and said, "The ones you lose come back different." I jolted awake, covered in sweat, the necklace glowing faintly on the nightstand. Grace stirred beside me. "What time is it?" she mumbled. I didn't answer, because in that moment, I noticed something terrifying. On the table next to the necklace sat a second tooth, one I'd never seen before. I didn't touch it at first, just stared. It was smaller than the first, rounded, whiter, pristine. No chain, no note, just there, sitting calmly on the wood like it had always belonged. Grace sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What are you staring at?" she asked, then froze when she saw it too. "That's not the same one." "I know," I whispered, "and I didn't put it there." We examined it like it might bite back. "Are you sure this isn't a prank?" she asked. "Like, one of your groomsmen? Or your dentist finally snapping?" "No one else has a key to this apartment," I said. "And I locked the door last night. Twice." She leaned in closer. "Well, what do we do with it?" That question echoed in my head the rest of the day. I didn't take it with me. I couldn't. Instead, I placed it in a Ziploc bag, sealed it inside a mason jar, and put it in the freezer. Because when life hands you unexplained teeth, that's as rational as things get. I tried to go about my day, but everything felt off. Street signs looked slightly misspelled. People seemed to pause mid-step when I passed them. The barista at my usual spot called me Tom 3 times, even though my name is Will. "You okay?" Grace asked at night, watching me poke at my dinner. "No," I said honestly. "I think something's wrong." She nodded. "I've been feeling it too. Like the air's heavier. Like we're being rewound. Rewound." She looked at me seriously, like the world is trying to put something back the way it was. I laughed nervously. "What, like molars?" But she didn't laugh. Not this time. What if that first tooth wasn't just your tooth? What if it was something else? My breath caught. "Like what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "A placeholder. For something that wasn't ready yet." That night, I had another dream. Spencer again. Only this time, he was younger. Sitting in a bright room, holding a tooth identical to mine. "Some people bury their secrets," he said softly. "You swallowed yours. But they always find their way back up." I woke gasping. The freezer door was open. The mason jar was empty. And on the kitchen table, both teeth were now lined up, and next to them, a third one. Grace walked in, saw them, and said nothing. Just reached for my hand and whispered, "I think you're remembering something you were never supposed to forget." That was 2 years ago. We still don't know why the teeth keep coming. Every few months, another appears. Always alone. Always silent. But Grace, bless her twisted, brilliant heart, started collecting them. She built a little glass case labeled, "Things That Found Us Anyway." We keep it in the guest room. Visitors never ask. They always notice it. They just don't ask. People think our story ended with a wedding and a meatball and a lost molar. But the truth is, that was just the beginning. The twist isn't that I swallowed a tooth. It's that the tooth came back and brought everything else with it.